So today we're going to be learning about preterite and imperfect in the Spanish language, which preterite and imperfect are the two main forms used to conjugate verbs in the past tense in the Spanish language. So when you're talking about things that happened in the past and you need to conjugate the verbs, so in the English language it would be like this did happen, or this happened would be the present tense, and then this did happen would be the past tense. So that's what we're trying to look at, and in the Spanish language there's two different forms. There's preterite and imperfect, and so this is a tool designed to effectively help you choose which one to use and when. So when it's appropriate to either conjugate your verbs in the preterite or in the imperfect, because there are rules for each one and which category they fall into. And a quick disclaimer, this tool should not be used to learn the different conjugations for preterite and imperfect. Instead, you should use this after you already have the conjugations learned as a mechanism to decide when to use either one and then conjugate it from there. And so, into the meat of it, preterite is used when talking about one-time concrete events in the past with a definite start and end time. So an example of that is if I were to say the birthday party was on January 5th. Whereas imperfect in general is used when you're talking about ongoing, repeating, or simultaneous events, or details that provide background for stories and help move the plot further, but they're not necessarily like major points in the plot. So these can be anything such as like weather, date, conditions meaning like social conditions or like things in that sense. So one example of that would be if I were to say it was sunny on January 5th, was, the verb, would be conjugated in the imperfect. So here's a practice problem. So if I were to say when I was a child, I did not speak English, which one would was be? Would it be imperfect or preterite? So I'm going to pause the screen and give you a minute to think about both of those, and then we'll come back to it. Okay, so was, if you thought that it was imperfect, you would be correct because you're talking about the time when you were a child, but your childhood doesn't have a definite stop and ending time, or start and ending time, excuse me. So it would be imperfect because, like how I said on the previous slide, since it's a background detail and it's not a concrete event, it would be imperfect. And similarly with speak, it is a ongoing recurring event that you in this case did not speak, but if the action verb of speak would be an ongoing event. It doesn't have a definite start and ending time, and also both of these verbs don't really help move the plot line along in the sense that they are climactic integral parts of the plot line, which would make them preterites. So they're both imperfect. So then the next one that says last night I ate dinner with Steve. I'll give you a minute to think about that, and if you think ate would be in the preterite or imperfect. Okay, so if you thought that it would be preterite, then you're right, because it says last night, so it's indicating a specific point in time, and it is the main ate dinner, to eat dinner with Steve is the main plot of the sentence. I mean, it's pretty much all the sentence is saying, so it's an integral part of the story. It's moving the plot line along, so it would be imperfect. So if you got both of those right, give yourself a pat on the back, and good job. So one other point that I want to bring up is interrupting events, because if you have an event in the past that's let's say, you were watching TV when your mom came in and handed you a card. Since those are two different ones and they're kind of weird, there's special rules for them. So for interrupting events in the past, if an event is interrupting another event, the ongoing event, or the one that's happening. So with that example, you're watching TV and your mom comes in, you're watching TV would be imperfect since it's providing background for the story. And then similarly, the one that is that is interrupting would be preterite, because it is a one-time concrete event that is helping the story move forward. And so here's a little cheat sheet that's really helpful in determining whether something should be preterite or imperfect. And so it gives you, like, obviously here, like, Simba cheated, and that tells you which one would be preterite and which one would be in the imperfect. But obviously, like, when using things like this, you can't have it on your test or anything. So it's better to just, practice and get better at those things. So here's another practice problem. Sam called while you were studying. So this is an example of the interrupting event. So Sam called, which is a one-time event that's moving the plot line further, so it would be preterite. While you were studying is an ongoing event without a definite stop and start, so that would be imperfect. And then here's one last practice in Spanish. So Ben studied last night. Since he was studying, it would be preterite because it was last night, so it's a one-time event with a definite start and ending time. And so if you were to conjugate this using the preterite endings, it would be Ben estudió anoche. And so just in summary, to wrap things up, like I said, preterite and imperfect are the two conjugations for past tense verbs in Spanish. And in general, preterite is used for one-time concrete events with definite start and ending times, whereas imperfect is used to provide background details that just help build a basis for the story but aren't necessarily important details in it. And cheat sheets like the Simba cheated one that I showed you are helpful, but the only way to get better and learn these things is to practice as much as you can. Bye, guys.